Welcome, friends, fiends, and familiars, to the Comic Fiends Comic Friends. On this show, I bring on friends to talk about comics. This week, I've got my comic friend Colton. Welcome.
Hey, how's it going?
Doing all right, man.
That's good to hear.
Yeah. So first things first. We're mutuals on Twitter, and we've sort of had some exchanges there. But I don't know if you remember this, but my first encounter with you, I don't think was super great.
Oh, really? Dude, go on.
Yeah, I think not. This isn't what you did, but it's what I did, and I realized it. But it's one of those things that I feel like people are finding out now, or are having to be aware of now on Twitter, where you're like, hey, I'm gonna make like an ironic joke, and they're gonna get it, but nope, you just come off looking like a jerk, and that's what I did. Or that's the feeling that I got. Because you were talking about Dungeon Meshi, and you were talking about, like, I think it's when the first volume came out, you were super excited about it, and you had I think either a Manga Mavericks came out about it, or you had a reaction thread on it, and I was like, hey, guess what? You can also pick this up officially licensed in stores, and you're like, yeah, that's what I did, and I was like, oh, no, that's not what I meant to do.
I think I remember that. I wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if it makes you feel any better, I wasn't really like upset. I was just kind of like, "Yep, that's what I did." Yep.
Okay. I do feel a little bit better, but I had that like on just sort of in my heart for a while, and I was like, "Oh, this guy thinks I'm a d-bag. That's good," but that's
no. I mean, I didn't have a bad impression of you at all. I was just kind of like, oh yeah, I mean that guy commented on a thing, and then I happened to see that you added me a couple more times, and I was kind of like, oh, okay, this guy seems cool. He seems like a nice guy, I guess. I mean, right. Look, I fall into that trap too of like, you know, like I follow a lot of people on Twitter, but I don't talk to them as much. But I feel like since I follow them, they like, I just assume like, you know, we kind of look at each other's like tweets or whatever. So I assume, oh, well, if I make some kind of joke or whatever, like they're my buddy, they'll just get it. But sometimes that's not always the case. So I totally get where you're coming from, because sometimes I fall into that trap as well, and it doesn't feel good.
No. But yeah, hey, you know what? I'm glad that things sort of worked out, and that, you know, we're cool. Here we are, right?
Yeah. I think I'm pretty sure we're cool. I think we're cool. We're cool. We're cool. Yeah. Everything's cool. I mean, any friend of Grant the Thief is a friend of mine. Because, you know, I know we both know that guy. May or may not do a podcast called Blade Licking Thief. Shout out to Grant. He's a great guy. I need to record with him more, because he really is fun to have on other shows. Yeah,
he's a real treat. Real treat to have around. Shout out, Grant. What up? I don't know if he's listening, but yeah.
Cool. I'm on this show.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So then, to get into it, what kind of comics do you read? I suspect, and I'm counting Western publications. I'm counting manga. I'm counting webcomics. Everything. I love everything, and I want to hear what people are into.
Okay. Well, I mean, I feel bad because, unfortunately, I do read I really do just read all manga. That's pretty much what I read mainly. But
that's cool, man.
Well, I mean, I feel bad because like I feel like I should step out of my comfort zone sometimes and try to read a few more like Western publications. Like I remember on Twitter, I asked a lot of my mutuals to give me like recommendations for Western comics. Because, you know, for the longest time, I had just assumed Western comics equals superhero comics. And obviously, nowadays, I know that's not necessarily true. And that there are a lot of American comics that aren't superhero comics that, you know, I would really like to get into. Hell, even, like, I try to get into the superhero comics every once in a while. Like, you know, sometimes I'll buy an issue of Amazing Spider-Man. But that kind of sucks because I have that disease where I have to start everything from the beginning. Right. So like I literally started from Amazing Spider-Man issue 1 all the way back from like 1960 whatever. And sometimes you know those those aren't always the most engaging read. 60s comic books sometimes aren't all that exciting. because at least from like what I've read of Spider-Man or whatever, it's usually like it's usually a lot of like explaining what Spider-Man is gonna do to a villain. Like I'm gonna like say if I were Spider-Man and I were fighting the Green Goblin, and I'd be like, oh, I'm gonna punch you in the face while swinging around on my web, thus causing you to fall down. Like that kind of stuff. The dialogue isn't always the most engaging, unfortunately, but that's just kind of how I'm assuming that's just how superhero comics were back then. So I can't really blame them.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I love Spider-Man. I love the character of Spider-Man. So that's kind of mostly the reason why I go back and read those. But I guess just to get to the point, like I do want to read more American comics. I have a whole list that I want to get through hopefully this year. It's really just about having the money to do so. And you know, now that I'm like renting my own apartment, that sort of messes with my budget a little bit. But yeah, eventually I'll get to some of those. But you know, yeah, I read mostly manga. I and even within manga, I feel like I don't, as far as like jumping out of my comfort zone goes, I don't feel like I read enough outside of like shonen manga, because I'm a huge fan of Shonen Jump. I read it every week or as much as I can. Sometimes I fall like a month or two behind on the Viz edition.
Okay.
But I try to do my best to read that every week, because there are definitely a lot of series in that magazine that I love reading week to week, like, you know, One Piece, My Hero Academia, Promised Neverland, Dr. Stone, just to name a few off the top of my head. But yeah, so like as far as manga goes, like I really want to read more shoujo manga. I think the only two shoujo titles I've ever really read at all were Fushigi Yugi and like the first volume of My Love Story, and that's kind of about it. And I feel terrible because that's kind of a running thing on Manga Mavericks, the podcast I host.
Sorry, was that Boku no Love Story, or is it Ora no Love Story, or is it?
I see what you're trying to do. You're not going to trap me. But
I know what you're talking about.
But no, yeah, that's a thing I really want to try to do, not just on Manga Mavericks, but just with me in particular, like just in general. I just want to read more shoujo manga and more seinen stuff too. Like I really want to start reading stuff like Monster and Dorohedoro. I see a lot of love on my timeline for Dorohedoro in particular. And Monster, I've actually seen a lot of the anime for, but like I never finished it, so like I want to revisit that at some point. But yeah, so you know that's essentially it. I'm a huge fan of manga. I love collecting as much as I can and reading as much as I can, and I do way too many threads on Twitter about what I'm reading, to the point where sometimes I think, am I doing too much? Should I just sit down and read this thing and like not constantly vomit my thoughts on Twitter? You know, sometimes I have an internal crisis, you know, thinking about that kind of stuff. But you know, like some threads aren't like, some of the threads I do aren't as extensive as others. So I guess that's kind of a nice thing. Like let's see, manga on manga.club, which is it's a newer service that offers free legal manga. A lot of different titles too. Like some are like really steamy, like romance stories. Some are like obscure 90s sports manga. Just titles that I don't think anyone's ever heard of. I'm reading something on there called Bikings, which is, you couldn't tell, it's a sports manga about bikes. Not to be confused with Yowamushi Pedal. And you know, I'm doing a thread on that, but I'm also not as extensive in that. Sometimes I'll just start threads just to kind of like jump in every once in a while and say, oh hey, I like this about this, and then just kind of keep reading. Whereas with stuff like at some point during the year, I want to start a thread on Yu-Gi-Oh! Because I had been collecting the 3-in-1s from Viz Media. And, you know, Yu-Gi-Oh! Was something I have been a fan of for years, like probably since elementary school. You know, because I played the card game and whatnot on and off. And fan of the anime and whatnot. So Yu-Gi-Oh would be something I would probably be very extensive about as much as I could, because that's a series I'm already super into, but like I've never actually read the manga to completion. Yeah, so that would be something like that would get a lot of my focus.
I've read through Duelist Kingdom, but I don't think I have anything. What does it go into Battle City?
Yes,
next?
Battle City's the next arc. Have you ever read the first like 7 or so volumes of Yu-Gi-Oh?
Yeah, they're the only ones I still have. I don't know what happened to the rest of Duelist that I had at some point, but I still have 1 through 7. I read them at least once a year, I think.
Interesting.
Or every couple of years.
I also want to say that's something I really appreciate about the 3-in-1s for Yu-Gi-Oh! Is that, because unfortunately, Viz's edition of Yu-Gi-Oh! Is kind of plagued with the same problem that, like, their Dragon Ball manga is, where, like, they feel the need to, like, split up the series into, like, sections. So, like, the first 16 volumes of Viz's Dragon Ball manga are labeled as Dragon Ball, while the rest is labeled Dragon Ball Z, because we just can't get away from that Dragon Ball Z label, because nobody cares about Dragon Ball. That's the joke. And so they did the same thing with Yu-Gi-Oh, where it's like the first 7 volumes are just Yu-Gi-Oh. After that, there's Duelist, and then, well, most of it is labeled under Duelist. And then I think like the very last arc of the series is labeled like Millennium World or something. So what I appreciate about the 3-in-1s is that they just do away with those labels, and it's all just Yu-Gi-Oh. So it's not as confusing. Like you're just reading through all of Yu-Gi-Oh. You don't have to keep up with, oh, like what part of the series am I in, or like, oh, is this different from this thing? Like, no, like it's all just Yu-Gi-Oh. Like those labels didn't obviously didn't originally exist, you know, with the I guess with the Japanese release. So there's that. I'm a stickler for that kind of stuff, unfortunately. Like that's the kind of hill that I like to die on.
Right. I don't blame you. I think the distinction is important if it's like a completely different series, which there are, but not for the main.
Yeah, that I don't know. Like for Dragon Ball, it kind of makes sense, but I'm not really sure why they did that with Yu-Gi-Oh. I guess I don't know, because I guess it's probably because the first 7 or 8 volumes are so different from the rest of the series. Because within the original Yu-Gi-Oh manga, like Duel Monsters really doesn't become a staple until like very later on. And the first 7 or 8 volumes of Yu-Gi-Oh are pretty much just, oh, it's about this kid with this weird sadistic spirit who likes to gamble and take people's souls away, and it's awesome.
Yeah. That's the appeal, I think. That's why I keep going back to the first 7.
They probably came up with that distinction. They probably came up with the duelist distinction to, you know, to let people know, okay, if you want the Yu-Gi-Oh that you grew up with on Foxbox or whatever, this is it right here. This is classic Duelist Kingdom, Battle City, whatever. So I guess that kind of makes sense, but I don't know. As personally, to me, I just find it kind of confusing. Like, what if somebody new were to try to get into Yu-Gi-Oh? They'd be like, oh, I don't know, where should I start? There's like 3 different series, even though it's not 3 different series. So there's that.
Right. Speaking of, you know, where people start, where can you think back how you got into comics? Like where your start was? Like what? Like was it Yu-Gi-Oh? Was it through this, or was it?
Oh man, well, thinking back, like obviously, like I don't want to say obviously, but because no one else knows. Like thinking way back, I mean, I was in the superheroes. I didn't read superhero comics, but I was in the superheroes. Like, you know, when I was about 10 years old, stuff like the Sam Raimi Spider-Man films and the Ang Lee Hulk movie were like really relevant. Because I had first, because that was my first exposure to Spider-Man, was that first Spider-Man movie back in 2003. And I saw that in theaters and thought it was like the coolest stuff I'd ever seen.
You're right. It was.
And from and like from there, you know, I would get into like the old 60s Spider-Man cartoon and all that stupid stuff. And, you know, I would consume whatever Spider-Man I could find, or whatever my parents were willing to buy me at the time. Same with the Hulk. I remember when the Ang Lee Hulk movie was coming out. You know, I would get so excited that, like, because I think around the time that movie was coming out, I think they had released on VHS a few episodes of the original like live action Hulk TV show with Lou Ferrigno, I believe, and I think I have a VHS of that somewhere with like the first 2 episodes of that show. And I was really into Hulk at the time because like that new movie looked really cool. I don't know if it really holds up anymore, but it like I was like 10, 11, like all the Hulk was really cool to me back then, whereas nowadays I'm kind of indifferent to him, honestly. Like I still love Spider-Man, and I'm always gonna have Spidey is always gonna have a spot in my heart, but I feel like I kind of outgrew the Hulk a little bit, just personally speaking. So basically it would be this thing where like if a new superhero movie came out, I was basically a sucker for whatever old iteration of the superhero Walmart was selling or something. I don't know. It was
okay.
Yeah, I was a kid. I'll buy anything with a superhero on it. If I saw Spider-Man on a bunch of fruit snacks, I'll buy him. Like I'll make my parents buy him. I want to eat Spider-Man.
Maybe then I'll also have spider powers. No, I did that stupid thing too. I was like, maybe if I eat this spider or if I let it bite me, I'll end up with superpower. It didn't happen because I chickened out, but it was a thought that occupied me for way too long. Until I realized, no, this is stupid, and you're going to get hurt.
That doesn't happen. So I was really into superheroes, but I wasn't really into superhero comics. Like I wasn't really into comics as a kid until I got into manga. But I only got into manga because what was it? I think my first exposure to manga, and I still have this issue. It was the February 2006 issue of Viz's Monthly Shonen Jump, back when it was in print. Like Naruto on the cover and everything. With anime guides for the latest episode of Bobo on Toonami, and there's even an interview with Riichiro Inagaki of Eyeshield 21 fame. So yeah. I remember that one very well because he's asked who his favorite football team is, and he answers. He either answers I think he answers the St. Louis Rams, which at the time I thought was really cool because it's like, I live in St. Louis, I live in Missouri, I grew up here in Missouri, so see that mentioned, I was like, oh, he likes the Rams. Now I guess they're cool. It just me being a kid not giving a crap about sports at all. But
if people ask me, hey, do you follow any sports or who's your team? And I actually say the Devil Bats, and they're like, who's that? I'm just like, oh, it's like a Japanese team.
Maybe I should do that next time. See what they say. No, yeah. So that was my first exposure to manga at the time. Was just this issue of Shonen Jump with Naruto on the cover, and obviously, like I was already like super into Naruto at the time, and like I was pretty much watching it every week on Toonami pretty religiously.
I believe it.
It was really my favorite thing for a while. Because I remember very specifically at the time the tuning exams were starting up at that point. And I had looked through the issue and saw that at that point in Jump, the American Jump was up to what was it? It was in the middle of like the last stage of the tuning exams, like the actual like tournament battle thing or whatever, where everybody fought, and it was up to the Hinata and Neji fight, and I remember that really captured me because like that fight is really bloody, in particular, and at that point that kind of caught me off guard because obviously they didn't censor Naruto a lot on Toonami. Like, characters still got to keep, like, their cigarettes and stuff, because, Naruto was cool like that, and unfortunately One Piece couldn't get that same treatment, I remember that catching me off guard, because, I think they would edit some blood out, I don't remember, or there might not have been as much blood on the American airing on Toonami or whatever, because I remember thinking, wow, this is a lot more bloody than I remembered. So like, more blood equals me feeling like an adult at the age of 11, 12 or whatever, however old I was. Sense. I was just starting middle school when I when I had my mom buy this issue for me. I was literally like, "Hey, Mom, can you buy this for me?" And she was like, "Yeah, sure, whatever." and I got it. Man, at the time, I think I read through Naruto, One Piece. I think I might have read through Bleach a little bit. Man, I'd have to get the issue again because I don't remember exactly what was in that magazine. I think Yu Yu Hakusho was still in the magazine at the time. And Shaman King and just all kinds of stuff. A lot of series I hadn't really heard of, but I would still kind of flip through anyway, but I wouldn't like really read them. Because like I said, I was more of a Naruto and One Piece fan at the time. And that was really all I knew. And Bobobo. So as soon as I had bought that issue at Jump, a friend of mine in middle school, he had one day, because he had seen my issue of Jump, and he basically just whipped out his volume of Bobobo, like the very first like one-shot graphic novel that Viz had released covering like one arc and then nothing else. And then eventually they would try to do a proper release, except they started like 11 volumes in and try to sell volume 11 as volume 1. And yeah, Bobobo's release is really confusing and unfortunate. Yeah. I didn't know. I would totally.
Well, I didn't know that they actually released more than just that one volume, because I have it somewhere. I hope it's on my bookshelf. But I think the reason that they released that one, because it's like a 2-in-1, right? It's like it covers it more. It's a bit thicker than a regular volume, I think.
Oh yeah, no, it's thick. It's probably about like 2 volumes worth of content.
Yeah, and I think that one, they released that one specifically because that one has Yu-Gi-Oh popping out of Bobobo's afro, right?
Yeah, that's right. I remember that really blew my mind as a kid. Yeah,
I really was like, they have this kind of relationship at Jump? That's amazing. Like, that's so cool. Right?
Oh man, yeah, it's really cool. See, because one of my best friends is like super into Marvel, so because it's really because of him I see all these Marvel movies. And so like, you know, like what's interesting between me and my friend is that like, you know, he's super into Marvel and stuff. Like I'm about as into Jump as he is, where it's like, oh, like we're both into these like big powerful like publishers that like have this world of characters that could just kind of intersect with each other at any time. And that's what I feel like Jump is, which is one of the many things I really love about Shonen Jump is that every once in a while characters can just appear in other series and it's not usually a big deal, and it's so great. I love it.
Yeah.
But no, yeah, so Shonen Jump was my first exposure to manga, but I guess to make a long story short, Bobobo, I think, was the first manga I had actually sat down to read, because I had borrowed this one-shot volume from my friend, and, you know, obviously I was very surprised because, you know, there are certain jokes and certain content in that volume that, like, wasn't going to make it to the anime, because I think there's a bunch of women in bikinis at some point as a part of a joke. I don't really remember. I remember there being some sort of risque stuff and more blood and stuff that I know wasn't in the anime, but I also think that might have just because it was a Toei anime, and you know they usually tend to water their content for a certain series down a bit.
Yeah, that's true.
So no, yeah, that was technically my first exposure, like the first series I had read, and then I got into One Piece, and you know things just kind of went from there.
Yeah, I don't blame you. I'd mentioned this. I've said this on other episodes, but my sort of first Jump experience, I think, might actually have been Naruto. I had like the first 3 volumes of it, and I remember thinking when I first saw, I think I'd heard of One Piece, but I wasn't really on it yet. I was still kind of in this like Naruto mindset. And there's an ad. It was an ad at the very back of the Naruto volume, and Luffy was making this face where his lips were kind of curled up, and he's just—it's not a smile, but he was like kind of like he's throwing up a thumbs up at like the camera, I guess. And I remember seeing that and being like, ugh, like what is this? Ugh, like as a
this looks like a cartoon.
Yeah, no, I don't want. This isn't my manga. Like this isn't right. And you know, give it a few years, and my feelings have significantly changed on that. Where Naruto is a fleeting memory and One Piece is alive and kicking. Like,
yeah, I definitely had the opposite kind of taste as a middle schooler. Like, I liked really cartoony stuff. Like, So One Piece definitely appealed to my sensibilities, definitely. Like, I also, I guess I liked a little bit of everything, because, like, I know that this problem still persists with One Piece to this day, where people can't get into it because of the art, which, on some level, I kind of get it, because people might think the art is too goofy or whatever, and they can't take it seriously or something. Like, on some level, I kind of get it, but also at the same time, I don't know. I personally think that obviously Oda's art is like one of One Piece's greatest strengths, because it's able to get away with so many cartoony antics, but it can there's also a very emotional, like, motivational story there at the same time. Like, you care about the characters, and you care about the journey they go on. So it's still very compelling. There's more to One Piece than meets the eye. Like, don't judge a book by its cover when it comes to One Piece, because it's capable of a lot more than it looks like. But as a middle schooler, like, I liked cartoony stuff like One Piece, but I also like really cool action shows like Naruto and whatnot. So again, I wasn't really like one extreme or the other. I liked both. Like, I especially liked it when, like, things could combine, certain aspects like that. Like, when I was in middle school, I also was a huge fan of, like, Cartoon Network's original, like, Teen Titans show or whatever. Because, I really liked how goofy that show could be, but also had a lot of cool action.
Yeah, you're right.
So I like stuff that can especially, blend those two sort of things together, which is why I'm also a huge fan of stuff like Gintama as well.
Yeah, you seem, I feel like you're one of the authorities on this.
I've been called that before, and while I really appreciate it, I don't think I'm really an authority on anything. I'm just a very passionate person that likes a thing, I guess. I don't know. I mean, I've run a podcast about it, so I guess people have to listen to me about it. Sure.
Yeah. The one thing I will say about One Piece where I don't blame people necessarily is sort of just the dearth of content there is for it. There is a lot, but I feel my perspective on it is that there's a lot to enjoy. However,
exactly,
it is kind of a hurdle for people to look at and try to get into.
No, yeah, I mean that's the problem with One Piece, is that the longer it goes on, the longer the series gets. Which, I definitely agree with that. That, like, yeah, sure, it's long, but like you said, that just means there's just that much more to enjoy. And hey, when you compare it to its anime counterpart, like the manga is long, but, like, theoretically you could get through the manga a lot faster than you could ever get through the anime, which I think is something most people don't really think about.
So that leads me to sort of my next thought about comics or manga here, is that what would you say that you what you like about comics as a medium versus other forms, like not just adaptations but just as they exist? Is there, what are your thoughts on that?
Man, that's a very loaded question. Like, I guess my love of manga really does most of it kind of comes from the fact that, like, I guess really one thing I'll say is that a lot of my favorite manga unfortunately don't have the best anime adaptations. Like, for instance, like Neuro or Eyeshield 21. Those series are both amazing, but unfortunately they sort of got the they got the crap end of the stick when it came to a decent anime adaptation, at least in my eyes, where, like, both anime adaptations, like, as far as, like, colors go, I don't like really looking at either of them. And like, certain characters are sort of dumbed down from what they originally were. They both have, like, anime original endings that I'm not really huge fans of, or really hear anything good about. But yeah, I don't know. Like, if either of them were to get a reboot anime, I wouldn't be opposed to it at all. Like, I would love that so much.
You think with the you think with the success of Assassination Classroom, which I perceived a success since they went and did a few live action movies, that they would maybe think about giving Neuro a proper shake? Because, I mean, I watched it, and, there's parts of it I enjoyed. There's things that are still in my head, specifically Boku no David Rice. That's just never going to go away. That should have been Bokuwa, but just, there are things...
Yeah, this is my David Rice.
Yeah.
We know Japanese.
But there are things to sort of... I think you could find things to enjoy in Neuro, but like with Eyeshield, it was such a huge miss. Like, it's just a shame what happened with that one. Like, ay.
God, yeah. Eyeshield 21 out of the two, I definitely can't look at because, like, man, like I don't like the shade of blue they went with for their like school uniforms, like, and like I said, like the colors for that especially feel so dull, especially, and it's like especially. It's especially disappointing considering how colorful the original manga could be, but also it's really hard to replicate anything drawn by Yusuke Murata, except in the case of One Punch Man. I think the Madhouse did as good of a job as they could with One Punch Man.
Yeah,
which
they pulled it off.
Which makes me a little worried about like how Studio Dean is going to handle that second season of One Punch Man. But I'm still optimistic, unlike most people, it seems. That's one thing. Yeah, I really wish somebody would give Eyeshield another chance, because like I see a lot of at least on my timeline on Twitter, I see a lot of fan art for it nowadays on both, on the American and Japanese side of things. So like I assume there's some resurgence in it, maybe, or I could just be reading too much into things.
It's just you.
I mean,
it's just you.
It really could pop. I don't know. But no, yeah, I guess just getting back to the question, man, comics as a medium, it's so hard for me to quantify. But I guess, like I said, compared to the adaptations some of these series get, like, there's just a certain level of creativity with manga and comics in general that I really appreciate, that sometimes I feel like television series or movies or whatever can't always replicate. And I feel like a good example of this would be like would probably be Sket Dance, where which I'll probably talk more about later, but Sket Dance gets away with so many things that that its anime adaptation really just didn't have the time to, or didn't take the opportunity to take a hold of, or that doesn't make sense. But the anime adaptation for Sket Dance, I don't think is bad at all. I like, that's how I got into Sket Dance, and then I got into the manga. But just like, there are certain things you can do in comics that you really can't do in animation. For example, I guess one of my favorite portions of Sket Dance in particular is this whole storyline starts where instead of just a normal like character popularity poll contest thing, like usually most series in Jump would just have a character popularity poll and show off the results and then be done with it. But no, Sket Dance dedicates an entire chapter to having all of the main characters do this whole game show thing where like they have to guess how many votes a specific, very minor, not important character at all gets. And the loser of the quiz show has to become a stick figure for the entirety of the next chapter. And what do you know it? The main character, Basun, because he's the worst. Not really the worst. He's just he's a lot of bad stuff happens to Basun in particular, because it's funny. He's the butt monkey.
Okay.
He becomes a stick figure for the entirety of the next chapter. And sure, you could like I guess you could kind of do that thing in anime, but like I don't know. So that's probably not a very good example. But there are just so many like fourth wall breaking things. Like I guess as far as Sket Dance go, the character of Roman in particular, who is an aspiring shoujo manga artist whose joke is she's terrible at drawing. and that's the joke. But she is responsible for a lot of the very, very like heavy fourth wall breaks in Sket Dance, like to the point where characters will be having a conversation and she'll pop in and be like, "Oh, if you want," like give notes as to like which chapter of the manga you can find reference to, or oh, hey, we're referencing a thing that happened in bonus content in like volume 4, and like really specific fourth wall breaks like that. Sometimes she'll just like rip out of the page. So it's just stuff like that I really appreciate. Like stuff like that you can't really like jokes that are specific to her and the medium of comics you can't really replicate in animation.
Right.
At least not as well.
Yeah, I feel like maybe maybe the way things are presented nowadays, you could sort of get away with that with the onset of kind of absurdist comedy and kind of wall breaking ideas, or fourth wall breaking ideas. But I think that definitely gets ironed out, I think, with the way that anime was produced in the time that I imagine it was running. What year was that? Do you know?
What year was Sket Dance?
Yeah, when the anime was running.
I want to say 2010.
Okay, well, it's not that long ago, I guess, but
well, I mean that was like 8 years ago at this point.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's right.
Not to make us both feel old, but yeah, I know. It 2010 feels like it was like last year.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, so I mean, 8 years ago, the way things are presented, I think we were kind of not quite into the course system, right? Because that's what we're getting now, where a show can do a few seasons and then that's just what you get for the year.
Yeah.
And I feel like maybe the shows would sort of shy away from being a little experimental because, you know, it could affect the rating, which means that they could lose their time slot, which means that the show is basically dead, right? And then I don't know, maybe that's just I'm just kind of grasping at straws here, but I feel like nowadays you could maybe get a little weirder, but definitely that was something you didn't have to worry about in manga, right?
Yeah, I guess, because as long as we're talking about like, you know, longer running stuff, you know, you mentioned back then separating a series in the cores wasn't like as normal, I guess, as far as like, I guess, longer running stuff. Because even with Sket Dance, like Sket Dance ran, I think, uninterrupted for like 70 episodes or something. And so, I guess that's one other thing I really prefer when it comes to manga and comics in general is just, I guess, again, comparing them to their adaptations is just consistency. Because, you know, with stuff like One Piece, for example, you know, like One Piece, the anime in particular, unfortunately, doesn't really take a whole lot of breaks, maybe like a couple per year, but for the most part, that just continuously runs and runs and runs for pretty much until the heat death of the universe, or until it ends, which is pretty much the same thing. You have a multiple different people working on that show and animating it week to week. Like, you know, that's why the One Piece anime in particular, like the consistency in the animation and art for that series in particular is so sporadic. Like one week could look amazing and then the next week could look like they drew it within the span of like 2 days. It just which, you know, I don't necessarily blame the animators for that, because like, you know, animation in Japan it's a really thankless job, unfortunately, and my heart really goes out to the people who work for literally like less than minimum wage, you know, for their art, which is unfortunate. But you know, it's just, I don't know, like that's something I really enjoy about manga is that, you know, it, for the most part, aside from like a few assistants and some help drawing like backgrounds here and there, it's mostly like one person creating this thing or whatever. And you know, like, and, you know, some weeks, like, especially when it comes to, like, I notice in a lot of Shonen Jump series, I notice this with Naruto and World Trigger and Hunter x Hunter, too, where, like, there'll be some weeks where, like, the art is clearly not finished.
Oh, yeah.
Like, there'll be weeks where, like, you could tell, like, this was, like, part way through a rough draft, and lines weren't like erased, and like the characters clearly aren't finished being drawn and stuff like that. So there are some weeks like that, and that's just how a weekly publication, and Jump in particular, goes. Really any weekly anthology. But that's something I enjoy about manga, is that the art is for the most part pretty consistent. And depending on how long a series goes, the art for a series, if it goes on long enough, will go through some kind of evolution, like via JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, for example. Like, JoJo does not look the way it did back in like the late 80s at all.
Yep, not at all.
Yeah, I just like I like consistency in art. Is something I really enjoy about manga as well. Especially when it comes to like really high quality stuff, like like, for example, One Punch Man, and One Piece is usually pretty on top of things in terms of art. Just stuff that always just looks really good week to week. Which obviously isn't really the norm, because my heart also goes out to people who are able to draw this stuff week to week, because obviously working in a weekly publication is hell. And multiple manga artists have come out and talk about what it's like drawing manga week to week, and I feel terrible for them, because some like I feel like I'm one of the few people on the internet who read Jump and don't completely freak out when like One Piece goes on break or something. It isn't like, oh man, why do you have to take a break? Keep drawing or whatever, and don't realize, hey, there's a person behind there. Maybe he needs a break. Maybe he deserves like more than 3 hours of sleep a night. Or something.
I'm honestly, like, I feel it. Like, I'd like to know what happens next, but I'm like, I'd rather Oda be alive. So let's just let him have this week off, like whatever it takes for him.
If news were to break out tomorrow from Shueisha stating Weekly Shonen Jump will be moving to a monthly publication schedule for all of their series, I would be totally okay with that. I don't think that would ever happen at all. But if they decided, hey, all of our authors are going to release their series at a monthly release schedule, I would be fine with that, because that would mean my favorite creatives would be alive and actually get to finish their story without being sent to the hospital because they spend so much time working that they don't eat or sleep.
Right. I feel like there is an exchange there. Having something monthly, I do think having a monthly series gives them a lot more room to breathe. However, I think that there is a benefit to people who are able to put something out on the week to week. My core example here would be Hunter x Hunter. Like, I'd be okay. Like, you don't have to. I mean, I'm sure there's other things going on here, but if it meant that we only got like one Hunter x Hunter a month, and we just don't take these long hiatuses, that's cool. That's fine. Rest up, Togashi Sensei. Just we'll see you next month, not a year plus. But obviously, there's a lot more going on there, and I can't.
Hunter x Hunter is definitely a special case.
Just stay alive. Just stay alive, Togashi, please.
Yeah, take care of your back. That's all we want. I don't care. I don't care what the people say. Play as much Dragon Quest as you want.
Oh yeah.
But I guess man, I guess I feel bad. I feel like I can't answer the question without comparing comics to like their adaptations. No. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is about comics. I guess I just like to read, but I also don't. I'm not like, I don't really read like any novels at all. So I guess I like reading comics because I like looking at as reductive as this sounds. I like looking at the pretty pictures. And I just feel like the medium of comics is so capable of telling like these really interesting stories that unfortunately, because of the stigma that comics still kind of have, because there are still people out there who are like, well, comics are only for kids and they rot your brains out and whatever. There are still people out there that don't really recognize comics as a literary medium at all, which is unfortunate. Kind of like how there are people out there who don't consider cartoons real television at all because they're only for kids or whatever. Who only see them as, again, just kid stuff, and which really like lights a fire under me because I've read so many amazing stories thanks to the medium of manga and comics in general. Really some of my favorite literary works are always going to be comics, and that's just how it is for me personally.
Well, I mean, it seems like for you, there's a lot to appreciate, and that's good. I mean, that's a good thing. Like, if it means you're not reading, but you're reading this, hey, you're reading, I had somebody on here.
Yeah, exactly.
I had somebody on here whose life was basically changed from, by being able to read and learning to read through comics. And that I was like, I like comics, but to have that level of impact, like on your life and to be able to provide these things, I think it's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, no, I agree. Because I mean, that's not completely surprising to me. Because I do know people who have learned Japanese through reading manga, and obviously that's not the only way they've learned. Like, they'll take a few classes here and there, but yeah, they'll I know a guy who basically started learning Japanese through reading like Detective Conan, which is a really basically that's you're really like diving right into the frying pan there, because like Conan in particular is already a very wordy series, very very text heavy, so I cannot imagine trying to learn Japanese through reading Conan, because like that has to be really complicated to be able to read as a beginner. Like I don't envy anyone who tries to do that at all.
Well, it's one of those trial by fire learning things, right? You're gonna come out of this and you're gonna be different, but
yeah, it would be easier to, like, if you wanted to learn Japanese through manga, or at least read something at like a beginner's level, like Dragon Ball would probably be the best thing to read, because at least from what I've seen of like the Japanese version of Dragon Ball, it's, as somebody who took maybe a year's worth of classes back in high school, like 6-7 years ago at this point, I'm able to, like, I'm the kind of guy who's able to read a bit of Japanese but not fully understand it. Like, my Japanese is very rusty. Like, I got to learn hiragana and katakana. I never got to learn kanji because my class actually, I was supposed to take another year of Japanese as a senior, but my curriculum actually canceled their Japanese classes. So I was one of the last people at my school to learn Japanese.
Well, from here on out, it's self-study, and that's the only thing.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yep. I've been meaning to do that for years now, and I just never got back to it, which is unfortunate because I would like to learn more. But yeah, so I mean, I'm not an authority on this at all, but if you're gonna try to learn how to read Japanese through manga, yeah, definitely try and pick something easier.
Yeah,
something that uses a lot of hiragana, essentially.
Makes sense. All right. Well, this has been really cool, man. Let's get some recommendations from you. So, like, 3 things that you feel that I know there's a lot you got to pick from here, but the first 3 things that you think are really important, that you think people need to check out, people need to give some time to.
Oh man,
I know it's gonna be tough.
Well, not really, because like I do this thing a lot where like I really go through my because I constantly go through like what are my favorite series. As far as my top 10 goes, like, I would say the bottom 5 are pretty interchangeable. If I find something new that I like really really like some of those could be replaced. But like, as far as my top 5 goes, like, I was just thinking today that, like, as far as my top 5 goes, I think my top 5 is pretty set in stone.
Okay.
For a while. But yeah, I guess I'll just pick a few from like my top 5 favorite manga of all time, which some of them I've already mentioned, but I guess I can kind of go into more detail about some of them. So my first pick I'm kind of going in order from most impact this a series has had on me as a person and my love of comics and just life in general. Like, that's how much I love some of these series. So the first one I would definitely recommend is Sket Dance.
Okay.
As I mentioned before, Sket Dance, for those who may not know, is essentially is sort of a slice of life comedy drama about these three high schoolers who go by the code names of Bosun, Himiko, and Switch. And they all have particular abilities when they work together. They all kind of come in handy. And they basically use their abilities and their special skills to run this club called the Sket Dance, which is a club that essentially exists for, in general, making their high school campus life better. Like, they basically take requests and stuff from students and faculty alike, and they go around just helping people around their school. And, what I like about Sket Dance in particular is not only do I think it's very funny, though I will also say that when you first start reading Sket Dance, sometimes the comedy is a bit hit or miss. So not every chapter is going to be gut busting, because it's also very Japanese humor where, you basically have your Tsukomi and bokeh kind of thing, where it's like, oh, here's a weird guy doing a weird thing. Oh, here, I'm the straight man commenting on the weird thing, like that kind of stuff. So if you're not very into that, I'm not sure if this would be the series for you, because a lot of Sket Dance's comedy is about, I would say, 60% that.
Yeah.
But it's also very much like a Dr. Slump kind of series where, like, it's just a series about this crazy cast of characters who are able to, have like these really weird, wacky fun times, and there's a lot of fourth wall breaks and a lot of nods to the audience and whatnot. Just a lot of fun stuff like that, but is also very capable of a lot of very, very heavy drama. Like, I don't want to talk too much about it, but they're like Switch, for example. He's probably my favorite character in the entirety of the series. Not just because he's one of the more interesting characters, but his character arc in particular is the most powerful, I would say. Switch is amazing because you go for about 50 chapters thinking, oh, this guy's really funny or whatever. He's just a silly old otaku who talks through his laptop and that's his gimmick. But then later on you realize, through learning about Switch's life before he entered high school, that, wow, there's a very tragic reason why he only talks through a laptop. And it's very, very sad. And I cry every time I read it. So,
okay.
I want to see that more in manga. I want to see more gag characters that have some kind of underlying tragic twist to them. I've seen that kind of thing also done in Toriko before. Really, Sket Dance and Toriko I think are the only two times I've seen that kind of thing done. I'm sure it's probably been done in other stuff, but like that's just as far as I've read anyway. But I want to see more of that in manga because I really like characters like that.
All right.
So yeah, Sket Dance definitely gets a recommendation from me. But I guess I would also, as like my number 2 pick, I would definitely suggest reading Majin Tantei Nougami Neuro, or as it's probably known in English, Supernatural Detective Neuro, which again is something else we also mentioned. Is written and drawn by Yusei Matsui, who is also the creator of Assassination Classroom. Which I should also point out that, unfortunately, neither Sket Dance or Neuro have an official English release, but they are out there. Though, if you want to still support, both of these series and actually pay money to read them, they are available in Japanese through Bookwalker. Like you could actually buy digital copies of the Japanese volumes for like $3-4 each. It's actually pretty amazing.
Yeah, I think that's about how much tankobon costs when you're in Japan. Because when I was there recently, I was trying to make a point to grab all of the first appearances of the new JoJo's, and I walked out of the store. I think so. If it was It was under $30, I think, and I was like, oh man, not too bad. And they were like, yeah, okay, you just messed up our you just messed up our display, but fine. Like,
Wow.
yeah. Yeah,
but
sounds right.
yeah, see, that's actually a thing I've been doing on Twitter now. Is with some of the series I'm reading. Some series I'm reading, are only available through online scans, which is unfortunate. So what I basically do is, I still read translations of the series online, but I basically buy digital copies of whatever series that aren't licensed through Bookwalker, and when I'm tweeting about them, I very much prefer to throw some money back at the publisher and the creator, and basically also take screen caps from, my digital volumes on Bookwalker and just use those.
That's admirable.
So that way, I am trying to make an effort to not really use scans or promote them as much. People could probably argue that it's like, oh, I'm just trying to ease my own guilt, but at the same time, like I want to throw some money back at the people who make this stuff, because I actually want to pay for my stuff personally, and that's not a knock against anyone who mostly pirates. I mean that's a whole other discussion. But just going back to Neuro, if you have read Assassination Classroom and thought that stuff was crazy, Neuro is about a demon from hell named Nougami Neuro, and he is basically a demon who resides in hell, who eats mysteries. Specifically, he basically eats the energy that exudes from whatever puzzle, riddle, or mystery or whatever that he has solved himself. Because I guess that's just, he's a demon. That's how he feeds. Why not? And apparently, he has solved every mystery in the demon world, and basically decides, I'm going to go to the human world. There are probably some mysteries there. And so he basically takes hostage of this poor high school girl, and basically uses her as a cover by having her set up a detective agency to basically lure clients in so that he can solve their mysteries and basically eat more energy. And Neuro is great because, and this gets into, I guess, my thoughts on Assassination Classroom, whereas I feel like, and I've talked about this on Twitter sometimes before, but I personally feel like, because I was a fan of Neuro before I had read Assassination Classroom, but I feel like if I hadn't read Neuro, like, I started reading Assassination Classroom before it was licensed. Like, I pretty much read that right when the first chapter was scanned. So I was following it from the get-go, and that was because I was already very into Matsui's work. Going from Neuro to Assassination Classroom is good, and I really like it. But Assassination Classroom, I feel like compared to Neuro, as far as the art is considered, I feel like Assassination Classroom sort of plays it a bit safe. I mean, don't get me wrong, Matsui is still Matsui, and it's still very bizarre, and I enjoy that, but Neuro is a lot more unhinged. It's so hard to describe on an audio podcast. Yeah. Like, it's really something that, like, people need to see for themselves, because there are some pages in Neuro that are just so well drawn as far as, like, what angles Matsui tackles and how, like, grotesque his characters can get sometimes, and it's so, and part of the reason the art is like that is because Matsui has admitted himself that, because Neuro basically started out as sort of a Detective Conan-esque, like, mystery series where, like, like the whole thing was you basically have to try to, like, the series sort of encouraged you to, like, kind of solve the mystery along, with the characters, but Matsui admitted himself that, he doesn't feel like he's very good at writing mysteries, so he felt like he had to make up for that, with the level of art. And honestly, if it weren't for the art, I probably wouldn't be into Neuro as much. I mean, I like the characters and everything, and Neuro himself is is an amazing character to follow and watch, and I love him so much. Especially since in the anime he's voiced by Takahito Koyasu, who is, I'll say it, his voice is pretty much sex. Like, it's amazing, and I could listen to him read a phone book. But yeah, like, the art in Neuro is amazing, and I could go on about how much I love it. Like, that was definitely, like, Neuro compared to especially other like Shonen Jump stuff, there was nothing like it at the time at all. Mm-hmm. Like, it's such a different thing from your typical Shonen Jump manga. Like, it doesn't look like a Jump manga to me at all. Like, I'm surprised. Like, Neuro, along with stuff like Death Note and Gintama, to me belong in the category of series where I read them and I go, this ran in Jump?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Especially, yeah, it's amazing. But yeah, so Neuro is amazing and I love it. But I'm gonna get on to my last pick, my last recommendation. I again, another series I mentioned earlier, but Eyeshield 21.
Yes,
like, would probably be my number one recommendation. Because so Eyeshield 21, I have a very huge attachment to, and I love telling this story. So essentially, my first exposure to Eyeshield, because, you know, like, when I was in high school, what was it? My library had an okay selection of manga. They had a lot of stuff I hadn't read, but they also had a lot of stuff I wasn't really, like, interested in. Like, you know, they had mostly, like, One Piece, Naruto, and Bleach and stuff. They had all the popular stuff, but
right.
But, you know, they had some Junji Ito stuff. Like, they had, like, Gyo and Uzumaki and
okay.
I think they had all of Rave Master as well, which is something else I read. I need to reread that at some point now that that's being released digitally. Thank God for Kodansha. But, you know, they had, I think, the first 10, 13 volumes of Eyeshield 21. And, you know, for, like, I want to say about a year or so, because, you know, I would hang out in my school's library a lot. That was my safe haven. That's where me and my friends really like to hang out in the morning and whatnot. I would always peruse the manga section. I would see Eyeshield 21 a lot. You know, every time I would pass it, I'd be like, what's this manga about football? I don't like sports. This is stupid. Like, you know, I would totally judge Eyeshield 21 by its cover. And, you know, I had never read sports manga at the time at all. Which, you know, I was one of those people who just kind of dismissed sports manga entirely because, you know, sports manga sounds really boring. Like, why would I ever want to read a comic about sports? And so one day I had an art class, and we weren't really doing anything at the time. I don't think we really had anything better to do that day. So, like, I asked my teacher if I could use the restroom, and she said yes, not knowing that meant, okay, I'm going to go use the restroom and spend about 15 minutes in the library. So I would go to my library, and I would just kind of hang out a little bit, and then I realized, oh man, I gotta get back to class, but I also wanted to check out something to read because I was bored. And so I finally bit the bullet. I was like, okay, fine, I'll read this Eyeshield thing. I'm bored. I'll read anything, whatever. So I check out the first, like, 2 volumes out. And I start reading them, you know, in class or whatever. And I was surprised, like, how fast I got through the first volume. Man, like, that first volume of Eyeshield 21 really hooked me. Because, like, I wasn't expecting a comic about sports to be, one, interesting, or, you know, interesting or educational. Mm-hmm. Or 2, you know, the characters really hooked me because when you think, it's a manga about football, you don't think a psychopathic blonde-haired kid who's allowed to carry machine guns at school for some reason. Like, you know, those things obviously go together. I don't know what I was thinking. It's really hard for me to describe. Like, Eyeshield 21 is important to me pretty much because Eyeshield 21 showed me that manga could make anything interesting.
Yes.
At that time, I was really mostly into, like, action-y, basically stuff that was more fiction than nonfiction. Like, you know, stuff that wasn't really very grounded. Like, I didn't really read any, like, high school series at all. Like, I just never really read something like that. So like something like Eyeshield 21 was definitely like outside of my comfort zone, and I'm so glad that I took the chance to read Eyeshield, because now it's like my second favorite comic of all time. Like, it just means that much to me, and I got so invested in the characters and the games too. I wasn't expecting, because like I never really watched a lot of football before Eyeshield 21. Like, my dad's a huge football fan, and he would watch games every Sunday, but I would never really pay attention. And Eyeshield 21 was a really interesting look into football, and really showed me that like the sport is a lot more interesting than I gave it credit for, and how there's a lot of like strategy involved, and it's not just a bunch of big muscly guys pushing each other. There's actually a lot of thought and, again, strategy that really goes into these plays and stuff, and I found that really interesting. And Eyeshield 21 I thought was also just very educational. Like, I learned a lot about football from reading Eyeshield. And I would go through that same thing again, because I think after that I read Slam Dunk or whatnot. And, I would learn a lot about basketball through that. And hell, Slam Dunk encouraged me to work out for a little bit. And actually, it got me wanting to like go out and be active and stuff. I mean, that didn't last too long, but I wanted to be outside and run and stuff. And man, like, sports manga sometimes just have that kind of effect on you where you're just kind of like, why am I sitting inside reading when I could be outside working out or something? I don't know.
Gets you pumped up.
Yeah, exactly. But no, yeah, Eyeshield 21 again really showed me how special comics could be, and how really like you could make like really manga just has this power to really just make any kind of subject interesting.
Right.
Like there are manga series about like bartending, table tennis, a manga about making manga, like, with the right creative people behind it, like, you could take the most mundane things. Like, there are manga about people eating.
Yep.
Like not even cooking, just eating food. And like, it's amazing to me that like with the right people behind a series, like you can make really mundane things like that just so interesting. And I think that's what really drives me to read more manga, is I want to read more interesting stories like that. And I think that's also part of the reason why I haven't really read as many American comics, because, there are I'm sure there are good American comics out there that aren't superhero comics, but like manga just has this diversity that I don't feel like Western comics has.
I think you'd be surprised, but I get what you mean. Like, it seems a lot more maybe accessible, or it's laid out for you in a way that you could be like, oh, what's this, and you can think of it as a whole about manga, like, or that manga covers all these different subjects for different audiences, and that's really awesome, man. I'm really glad to hear that that's how you feel, and especially about Eyeshield 21, because that was really my first sports manga too. I think at the time I had heard people talk up Prince of Tennis, but I wasn't like really into tennis, and it wasn't really getting to me the same way that Eyeshield did. I don't know what it was, but it hit me just right. And
oh, you know what? Actually, I told a complete lie. I totally forgot that I actually tried Prince of Tennis like back in middle school, like years before I tried Eyeshield. And yeah, man, I remember reading like the first 3 volumes of Prince of Tennis, and I was just not into it at all. Like maybe my feeling, like my tastes have obviously changed, so maybe I would be into it now, but like, yeah, I remember thinking at like 12, 13 that, yeah, Prince of Tennis is really boring.
Yeah, but that's the thing too, is it's not always going to be for you, but that it
exactly,
will have an audience, because that's just how broad like the reach is for it.
Exactly, yeah. Like, again, I could be totally wrong about this, but I've never heard of an American comic about like ballroom dancing before. But maybe it exists. I don't know.
Well, there's definitely stuff about eating, American stuff about eating.
I'm sure.
But yeah, ballroom dancing is a newer one, and I like that they can approach that and not have to worry about it being kind of odd. But oh man, this was great. This is a really good. This is a really interesting experience to hear about. Like, you know, I've talked about manga with people before or heard people's experiences with manga before, but this one really sticks out to me because it's also like in line with the being into the shonen stuff, because that's my bag too. But yeah, but this is really cool, man. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for inviting me on. This was really fun.
All right. Thanks for tuning in to the Comic Fiend's Comic Friends. And don't forget, the Comic Fiend is your comic friend too.